There are many different job boards for truckers. Why use the job board on thetrucker.com? There's several reasons. Thetrucker.com's objective is to help professional truck drivers find quality truck driving jobs and to help trucking companies find quality truck drivers. Thetrucker.com has the most comprehensive listing of truck driving jobs and job resources, and new and existing job listings are updated regularly. Thetrucker.com's job search function is easy to use and allows job seekers to search for jobs by driver type, trailer type, route type, location, company, endorsement, and experience requirements. Our proprietary application processing system, or APS, uses a sophisticated algorithm to match and automatically send qualified driver applications to the trucking company in real time. So your job application is efficiently processed and submitted to the trucking company immediately after the APS matches your qualifications to the job requirements. When it's time to consider making a change, you can find the right resources at thetrucker.com.
Ride with the Women Road Warriors Tuesdays at 8, 7 Central on TNCRadio.live. You're listening to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live, where James Rogers, Jamie Irvine, and Tom Kelly provide owner-operators of commercial trucks with expert advice about starting, operating, and growing a professional trucking fleet. It's time to mind your trucking business.
Good evening and welcome in TNC Radio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. I'm Tom Kelly along with Jamie Urban and James Rogers. We are happy to be with you tonight, back from a week off for Thanksgiving. Guys, I hope you're doing well.
Doing very well.
Doing great.
Let's start off with you, Jamie. You're up in Canada, so you didn't celebrate Thanksgiving the same time we did, but how are you doing and how are things going up in your neck of the woods?
Well, I have so many business interests in the United States that I get a Canadian Thanksgiving and a U.S. Thanksgiving, and for that, I am thankful.
Yes, a lot to be grateful for with that. Does that mean that you ate turkey and all the good stuff last Thursday?
We like to stick with those traditions. So the one thing, of course, the one downside of all that is it's a little more time in the gym because otherwise the pounds go on.
Well, I hear that. Yeah, absolutely. And James, how about you? How was your holiday?
I had a great holiday. This was the second Thanksgiving probably in 5 years I was able to be home. The first year that I took over the reins of, preparing the meal and everything, and it was good. It was really, really good. It was nice. I was able to get a lot of my drivers home to where they could celebrate with the family, and it really was. It was a nice holiday.
Fantastic. Well, guys, we've got all sorts of things. We were working through our list here and show prep, and we got all sorts of cool things to talk about today because there's a lot going on across the industry. But Jamie, I wanted to start off with you. We're going to start off tonight talking about winter issues, and you've got a couple of things on your mind.
Yeah, I saw just a notice that Trucklight had upgraded their Super 44 and 60 series lights. Now, these are predominantly for, let's say, refuse vehicles, construction vehicles, that kind of thing. And this new series or these upgrades, they all come with heated options. So the Super 44, it's a warning light. It's a 4-inch round LED light, 8 diodes, and it maintains the signature Pennstar design. And the 60 series is a 6-inch oval design that also features 8 diodes. It's a 70% reduction compared with that of the previous model. And both of these lights meet the SAE J595 Class 1 standard, which is the highest available performance class. The warning lights are offered in red and amber options. And like I said, they both come with heated. But that got me thinking about lighting in general. And the reality is that the days are shorter, got a lot more driving in the dark, but then also with some of these kind of winter storms that have hit, we look at what happened in Buffalo as an extreme example. But you could leave where you are and the weather could be fine, and you could find yourself, a few hours later driving in those winter conditions. So just an encouragement to everyone. Make sure your lighting is all up to date. Make sure that you don't have anything burnt out. Make sure that if you do have LED headlights, that you're not going to get them covered in snow and ice and not be able to see. So heated options and those heated elements are working properly. Just an important reminder as we enter into, of getting right into the heart of winter.
Our drivers are from all over the United States and Canada, and that is not the same driving experience for everybody. There are a lot of people who I work with who just drive along the Gulf Coast, and they have to worry about hurricanes. But of course, hurricane season's over as of yesterday. But they don't worry too much about winterizing their vehicles because they just don't go that north that often. However, you're up there driving in Northern Territories, James. What are some of the concerns that you have as a small business owner in this industry that keeps you kind of awake at nights, or things that you feel like you got to make sure you're doing to be winterized and ready to go now that we're coming into December?
Oh yeah, they call me a snow dog in this industry. I in the wintertime, it's one of my favorite places to run just because rates are higher, but it does, as a fleet owner, it does keep me awake at night. They're probably the first and most important thing that I as far as making sure our fleet's well taken care of is I've developed kind of a checklist, and it came from the military of what they need to keep on their truck as a personal bag or a jump bag or a bug out bag, just in case something happens. And usually it involves stuff like, keep you some, heat burners that you can light with a lighter, an emergency blanket, make sure you got plenty of water on the truck at a minimum, stuff like that they can stay warm in case there is a failure. And then we kind of move into, what can we do for the trucks? For me personally, I drive a truck with open tanks, exposed tanks. So I start looking at, okay, I make sure my tank heaters are working. I've actually invested in a set of quilted tank covers to help keep the heat there. I make sure I get a radiator flush, coolant flush to make sure all that's working. I got fresh coolant in there. My radiator's working. One big thing that is really important is check your hoses. The winter is hard on rubber, especially when, we're running these engines. They get up to operating temperature and they cool down. That is really hard on it. So I keep extra hoses on the truck. And that's a good spot to start. And as well, just like Jamie talked about with the upgrade to the lights he was talking about, I experienced that as well. I'm going to have to change my lights out because, we did switch over to all LED. Most trucks come with halogens. The problem with LED is they do not generate heat. So experienced a little bit of a snowstorm. My lights were completely covered, and I had to get out there and, old trucker trick and put, I had to put some sort of lubricant on there to where the snow and ice would not adhere to it. It's adhere to the lenses. And that can get pretty aggravating and honestly can get pretty dangerous if it's overriding it, That's just a few of the steps that we start taking.
Yeah, wow. And in addition to that, if you've got drivers working for you, you want to make sure that all those drivers have the basic knowledge they need of, for example, like with tire chains or with your tow hook. If your tow hook is not installed already, and where is it on the truck, right? We got to open the hood, and it's usually near the engine block, and then you have to unscrew it, and then you have to put it into the location for the tow hook so that the tow truck can pull you out. And I mean, this can happen with just a few inches of snow, and you're let's say you're exiting a highway, and now you're on that off ramp, and you get into a few inches of snow, and there's a bit of an incline, and if you don't have the right tires, you can get stuck. And I've seen this happen over and over again. And you see drivers get out and they don't have a winter coat, they don't know where the tow hook is, they're just ill prepared for those conditions, and that's dangerous because you're on the side of the road. There could be collisions. You also exposure to those temperatures. All of that those are real risk factors that need to be mitigated for.
And you're absolutely correct. And when you said about talking about other things like that, with the chains, that's other things you want to check too. Is make sure your chains are in good shape. At a minimum, have a set of what they call snow socks, because it does not take much for these trucks to lose traction in snow. They are full of torque and full of horsepower, and literally a small glaze of ice or, anything on the roadway or surface, you're going to lose traction. To go with that, something we implemented this year, and this was at the behest of actually one of our most veteran drivers, was we started teaching our guys how to change their own fuel filters. You know, hey, look and see what kind of fuel filter your truck's got, have extra ones on the truck, and then have the tool that you need to, because that is a very common thing when we run in the north. It gets cold. These trucks can gel up. Not saying they will, but they can. And something as simple as that can get you off the roadway.
Right. And James, another thing, it's a simple thing, but like, what about your windshield wipers? Are they ice blades? Because let's face it, if they're not, and you're driving, you start out in a place where there's no snow and ice, and then you end up where it's real cold, you got some wet precipitation, all of a sudden that freezes. Now your wiper blades are completely frozen over, and if you don't have the ice blades, you're going to really struggle to be able to maintain the appropriate level of visibility. That's just a small thing, but it is something that could lead to catastrophe if you don't take care of it.
It could, and you mentioned it. And this year, matter of fact, the fleet just over the Thanksgiving holiday, we all switched to and installed those heated ice blades. So those are they're game changers. I mean, I had to use them last week myself, and it was amazing. It really was. I had no issues at all.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say is it's related to the windshield, is also your windshield washer fluid, right? So make sure you've switched over to the -40 stuff,
right?
Because if you don't, that freezes up, and then all of a sudden you crack open the pump, you damage the tank, and it's a big repair job, all because you're running summer wash, bug wash that freezes solid.
Exactly. And then I'd say probably the last thing that, it's on our checklist, but it's in big red letters, is we always make sure we have anti-gel. We make sure we got anti-gel, and at least at a minimum, I always recommend that they have, it's called Diesel 911. It'll save you. It'll keep the water out of your fuel. It's saved my butt more than once, going through an extreme weather condition. I just put it in, boom, mixes with the fuel, and I have not had any problems once I've needed it.
Fantastic. Hey, great words, guys, and I think really helpful to those who may not drive in the north very often, but then they find themselves making the odd trip up north, and the next thing you know, they have to go to Buffalo, and let's say they're used to driving along the Gulf Coast. That's a very different world in December than the Gulf Coast is.
Very much so. Very much.
One last question for you, James. You were talking about the go bag. Now, do all of your drivers have a go bag with multiple passports from different nationalities and $10,000 cash in bills, or is that only for your 007 level drivers?
Just for our 007 level drivers. Most of my guys are old veterans, so hey, they try to keep everything to a minimum.
Okay, all right, great. So they don't need the secret passports and the handgun and all that kind of stuff. So
that's that's a different division in James's company. That's right. That's his mercenary division.
That's right.
Okay, just wanted to double check on that. Hey, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to be right back. You're listening to Mind Your Trucking Business right here on TNC Radio.live. Stay right there.
Catch Landline Now every night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, along with an encore presentation weekdays at noon, right here on TNCRadio.live.
Ready for the power of positive and something that will put you back to a time you wanted to last forever? Music is the ultimate time machine. What was your favorite time? Do you want to go back there? LTD Radio features the songs of the 70s, 80s, and 90s that will transport you to a happier time. It'll make you smile and brighten your day. We could all use that about now. TNCRadio.live is proud to carry the great music of LTD Radio.
Welcome back to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live.
Welcome back in TNC Radio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. I'm Tom, along with Jamie and James. Guys, on this segment, wanted to talk a little bit about manufacturing and where manufacturing takes place. Jamie, I know that you are heavily involved in the heavy duty parts world. And I want to talk to you about some of the things, the industry trends in manufacturing right now. I've been involved in the nearshoring, offshoring world for, greater than 30 years. I've spent a fair amount of time in India working with IT professionals in India doing offshoring there, helped build out a offshoring site in China, which, by the way, we had to close within 3 months. And I'll tell you why in just a few minutes. And have worked with this concept of shoring, both from a manufacturing standpoint and from a IT standpoint for a number of years. One of the things that I think is also interesting in the conversation now, a new term, at least it was for me, and I think for most people, there's a new term out there now called friendshoring. Friendshoring is starting now to take a look at where we do offshore manufacturing in countries where we can trust their political system and where we can trust where they are in alignment with some of the people who maybe the Western countries aren't as friendly with. And this has really come to roost here recently with the war in the Ukraine. There were a fair number of U.S. companies that were doing offshoring and even call center operations and those types of work in the Ukraine and in Russia and in countries that are favorable to the one side or the other, for instance, Belarus. And it has now become a major issue doing work in some of those countries. And so now we find that many, at least American, I would assume too, Jamie, Canadian companies are starting to reevaluate not just the location of, where are they as far as cheap labor and that kind of stuff, but where are they as far as politically, are we going to get in trouble doing work here? And one of the interesting outtakes of this too is that, as you guys may be aware, India has not really taken a side on the Russian-Ukrainian war. And they're trying to stay neutral on the whole discussion, which, quite frankly, has upset some American companies, and they're starting to pull out of doing work in India, which I find amazing because they don't necessarily have another place to go. They're just saying, okay, well, if you won't condemn the war, we are not sure we want to continue to do business with you. This has put the Indian prime minister in a very delicate spot where he has to watch his words very carefully, and he's trying not to upset either side, but sometimes walking down the middle of the road, you get hit by the car.
Yeah, and that's an interesting development with India because they're a Commonwealth country. They were part of the British Empire. Their official language is English, and so this is a company or a country rather that has been traditionally affiliated and associated with Western culture and society, and now that like you say, they're kind of trying to walk down the middle of that road. And you can't just look at the countries. For example, you might say, okay, well, we don't want to deal with China anymore because of the direction that China is going and how it is using its influence to try to change laws with different like NATO, not NATO. I'm sorry, I'm grasping for the name of it. The United Nations. So China has been working with trying to change some of the statutes on human rights at the United Nations level because they want to try to use its economic influence to bring more of the world into alignment with its political ideology, which is very overtly Lenin and Marxist. Is complicated stuff, and so you don't have to just look at those countries. You have to look at what might happen in the future, right? Let's say you have factories in Ukraine and Russia attacks Ukraine. Let's say you decide that you want to deal with companies who manufacture in Taiwan, and then China in the future attacks Taiwan. So the trend right now is towards what they're calling nearshoring or reshoring, and this is in response to the pandemic and to the supply chain disruption and chaos that it created. China is no longer the lowest cost sourcing option for U.S. manufacturers. So a lot of companies are adopting a China +1 or +2 strategy, where they might buy from countries where manufacturing is done, like in Vietnam or Malaysia or Thailand. And those manufacturing costs are seen now as being a third of the cost of manufacturing in China. Although, if you were involved in the heavy duty parts industry back in the 90s, like I was in 2000s, you know what can happen when you buy that low cost product that's being manufactured overseas. There's going to, it took a long time for Chinese manufacturers to get their quality up to a level that was acceptable for commercial use in the trucking industry. I tend to think that these countries like Malaysia and Thailand and Vietnam would probably have to go through the same kind of learning curve. So a lot of the products coming from those countries could be suspect. So I think a lot of us were hoping that we would see manufacturing return to North American soil. We understood that it probably would involve Mexico, but what a lot of us were hoping for was that U.S. companies would start to move their manufacturing facilities back to North American soil and control them. Unfortunately, what we're seeing a lot of Chinese manufacturers relocating to the U.S.-Mexico border. What this does is it gets them out from underneath the tariffs that were put in place by the Trump administration. And there's also some very friendly considerations around duty when crossing Mexico, U.S. and Canadian borders because of the free trade agreements that we have in place. So, but like, again, unfortunately, a lot of the companies moving to the U.S.-Mexico border are actually Chinese, not American.
That's stunning and very interesting. And I can understand why it's happening. And especially when you consider some of the supply chain issues that we had just getting the ships back and forth between here and China during the height of the pandemic for a lot of different reasons. And we won't belabor all of that again. But just to think that a lot of that manufacturing would be by Chinese companies just on the other side of the border, hadn't considered that as something that the Chinese would want to do until just recently. But I think they are a financial powerhouse, and while you're correct, of course, the country considers itself a communist country, they certainly have learned a lot about how to play in the free trade world.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at the long-term plans, which, like, none of this information is being kept secret. The Chinese aren't really hiding it. Xi Jinping is absolutely committed to staying in power. He's already broken the long-standing arrangement where the president would have 5 years in office and then he selects the next president and stays on as an advisor for 5 years. They did that since Mao, but Xi Jinping has now been in power going on 10 years. He has no intentions of relinquishing that control. And they have very clearly stated that they are going to use their economic influence globally to try to align the globalization of many different things in their favor. And of course, everybody, I guess, is always working towards their own interest. But this is a big deal because their interests do not align with a lot of the values and a lot of the things that we stand for here in the West. And so this is a big deal. And if manufacturing gets a foothold on North American soil and it's all run by actors that are not in alignment with our values, I think this creates a situation where we can have even more geopolitical destabilization globally, which is bad for everybody.
Absolutely. And as we record this program at the beginning of December here in 2022, we're seeing a disturbance across all of China, where many workers have risen up and taken to the streets and are protesting, demanding the resignation of their leader and fighting back against the COVID restrictions that have existed in China for a couple of years now. There was an incident just in the last couple of weeks where many people were killed in a fire that shouldn't have died, but were kind of locked down in such a way that they weren't able to escape properly. That has got a lot of people there upset. An interesting thing that did overnight, and I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but over the course of the last 24 to 36 hours, world crude prices have plummeted on futures index. The reason being is that if China does essentially shut down, the workers don't go to work, they don't do the things that they've been doing, they're so big and they use so much fossil fuel that it would have an immediate impact and create essentially a glut throughout the world that could force prices down at the pump rather quickly. So we could even see a dip in prices here going into the first of the year. However, at least some economists are saying, watch out for the rubber band on this one, because when they do all go back to work, they're suddenly going to need all that oil and then some, and then all the prices are going to shoot back up again. So it's amazing how a disruption in the political workings within China can impact how much you pay for a gallon of diesel here in the United States. So we look at this stuff sometimes and we see it on the news and we think, why do I care? Why are they showing this to me? I don't even care. Why do I care that there's some guy in China who's all upset with their president, wants him to resign? Because in that process, it can impact your pocketbook both positively and negatively over the course of the next few months.
And I know we're running up against our next break, but one of the things that happens, and you don't really think about this, but there's only so much storage capacity for fossil fuel globally. And so where this could be very detrimental to all of us is if demand drops off, then storage capacity is filled to capacity. Therefore, all production has to stop. Then when the demand snaps back, all of that storage is emptied, but production can't just flip a switch. It takes time to get back up and running. And this is where we see the shortages, which then drives the price up. Yeah,
and we talked about that in our last program, Jamie. You weren't able to be there for the whole program, but that's one of the things we talked about were the rumors about shortages of diesel fuel throughout the United States and so forth, and how much reserve is there. Right now, we've got plenty of space, but you're right. It wouldn't take long. It wasn't all that long ago, guys, when we had such a glut of oil in this country that we were paying Mexico premium prices to store oil for us. And, now we're in a position where we don't have quite the reserves that we like to have going into the winter months, but we still have plenty of reserves. Please don't buy that Twitter craziness that was going on that, we're almost out of diesel in the United States. That's not true.
No,
all right. So, yeah, we got lots of other things to talk about, but it's time for a break. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. You're listening to Mind Your Trucking Business. I'm Tom. He's James. He's Jamie. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
TNCRadio.live, your commercial driver navigation station.
For the best information source when it comes to trucking industry business news, go to thetrucker.com. From the latest spot rates and freight market stats to who's buying who and who's partnering with who in the world of motor carriers and fleets, the business page provides valuable insights on every aspect of the trucking industry. In addition, the section offers tips for making the most of carrier and driver discounts at travel centers across the nation. Wondering how COVID-19 is impacting the industry this week? Need tips for building business as an owner-operator or choosing the best carrier as a company driver? Curious about the latest news about nuclear verdicts? Find these answers and more in the business section of thetrucker.com. The Trucker News staff produces engaging business content for not only thetrucker.com, but also the Trucker newspaper, which has served the trucking industry for more than 30 years. With a focus on professional truck drivers, the Trucker News staff works to provide content that is relevant, objective, and engaging, pertaining to the trucking segment of the transportation industry. Just go to thetrucker.com or use the TNCRadio.live app to access the latest in trucking industry news.
Welcome back to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live.
Welcome back into Mind Your Trucking Business right here on TNCRadio.live. I'm Tom Kelly along with Jamie Urban and James Rogers. We're going to be talking in this segment, want to talk a little bit about electric vehicles. And I know as soon as I say that, a lot of people roll their eyes, other people cheer. It's becoming a very interesting conversation, and I bet more than one Thanksgiving table around the country this past week had somebody slamming their fist on the table one way or the other about EV. I have a lot of friends who've already purchased an electric vehicle and others who roll their eyes at it and say, never me. So let's talk about some of the myths that are existing. And let me start off by saying, guys, I am not opposed to EV. I'm not opposed to Santa Claus. I believe they both have their place in the world. But right now, the idea that everybody's going to be driving an electric vehicle by 2025 or 2030 or even 2035, that's a myth. And we can talk about why some of those reasons are. We've got a long list. We're not going to get through all of them tonight or in this segment, but I want to talk about a couple of them that until we resolve these issues, we're not going to be able to move forward with the whole idea of EV. And the first one I want to start with is maybe the one that sounds the simplest, but I think really it's going to be the most complicated. And that's taxes. Not Texas.
Yeah.
Taxes. We have an issue right now where most of the funding that occurs in America within states for our infrastructure comes from fuel taxes. Okay.
Correct.
Let's shut that off. Whoops. Can't do it.
Yeah,
That if we were to drop the spigot right now and say we're all going to plug in, and I know we can't right this minute, but what we're already seeing is that some states have begun levying taxes against the purchase of an electric vehicle because they have to, in some way, reclaim the money that they're going to lose by not getting the taxes at the fuel pump anymore.
Yeah, you're starting to see that. Like, I know in my home state, they're trying to figure out how they're going to recoup that. I mean, I'm speaking industry specific. You're talking billions of dollars. In a lot of ways, like the drivers try to get around that is obviously that it promotes the purchase of fuel in these said states. So it's going to shut off either way. I mean, that's going to kill it.
So let's talk about Missouri as one of the states that has the lowest fuel taxes in the nation. Basically put a moratorium, all but a constitutional amendment against raising fuel taxes for a number of years. Didn't touch it since between early 90s all the way until just recently. Did not touch fuel taxes. They have added some fuel tax in there, but only for those passing through.
Yeah. Yep. Just this year was the first year that they've raised the fuel tax, and longest I can remember.
Yeah. So it's always been a pretty inexpensive place to fuel up is to do that while you're going through Missouri because the taxes were lower. Well, that's all well and good. And we can all understand why after 20 or 30 years, you might need to revisit that policy, especially if you're using that money to handle your infrastructure of your roads and bridges and, the entire driving infrastructure that impacts everybody, whether you're driving a truck, four-wheel, whatever. If that money is not, and think about it, if I was to go to any particular state and say, we're not taking all your money to do infrastructure. We're just going to take 15%. We're just going to take 20%. We're only going to take 10%. How much of a difference that makes in their ability, because we all realize, and I assume this is somewhat true in Canada as well, Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, the infrastructure in North America needs work.
Absolutely. and like in the United States and Canada, there's lots of additional tax that adds to what you pay at the pump to support all of these programs.
But if we don't pay it at the pump, where are we going to pay it?
Well, that's where you're starting to see a lot of states, like here in the U.S. anyway, at least, you're seeing a lot in the Northeast states. They're trying to implement or come up with a program of a pay by the mile tax, to where now you're going to get taxed by the miles that you travel.
And I don't think people, part of what has to work for EV to work, and this is actually a different spot here on the list, so I'll look down a little bit further, is adoption. Okay, it's changing the hearts and minds of Americans and Canadians to embrace the idea of EV. But it's not just a matter of you're going to lose vroom vroom and you're going to replace it with that noise. and some people aren't going to like that. And we even see some EVs now that are coming out with noisemakers so that it sounds like you have an engine, just because people like vroom vroom. Okay, which I find hysterical. But being a sports car driver myself, I like vroom vroom. I like the noise and I like the power and all that. So putting all that aside for a moment, telling people we're going to tax you on the miles you drive is a change, a fundamental change to the way that people think about how they move around their neighborhoods, their cities, getting back and forth to school, whatever. That requires a change to their hearts and minds. And guys, it is hard enough right now to get any 4 people that you pick randomly in any city to agree on whether or not the grass is green and the sky is blue.
Yeah.
Okay. To grab a number of people and convince everybody this is the right thing because we want to do EV, so we're going to tax by the mile. That's going to be really, really hard for a lot of people to accept.
But I mean, it depends on which angle you're coming at this from. So if you buy into the climate alarmist doomsday scenario, then you can justify just about anything to force people to change their behavior because, from your perspective, if that doesn't happen, we're all dead anyway. So,
right.
The means is justified by the end.
Exactly.
But if you take a more, let's say, just a more measured response where you recognize, look, our weather and our climate are definitely changing. It's very clear that things are warming up. There could be some pretty, big impacts from that. But at the same time, you don't look at it from a complete doomsday perspective, and you take a more measured response. First of all, you get demonized by everybody who believes it's a doomsday. But politically, I just don't see how you're going to be able to move more balanced legislation through because of that alarmist kind of approach going on, especially people on what we would call the radical left. And so this is a very complex issue. And it's funny, there's a bumper sticker here in Alberta that I see everywhere, and it says, "My vehicle doesn't run on fairy dust and unicorn piss." And it's just like, look, there are realities. There are realities here about energy production for electricity. And also, like, for example, early adopters of electric vehicles, sure, they got to take advantage of the benefits of not having to pay at the pump. But when everybody's on electric, you're telling me your electric bill isn't going to go through the roof?
Well, yeah, and that gets into that's on some of the other lists here, and I agree that that's the problem with all this EV stuff, Jamie, is that the whole thing unravels at different levels, and even those who are very concerned about the environment don't have a solution to some of the environmental questions that EV raises. And we're going to talk about those in a future show. But I wonder how we're going to come up with a tax structure that works across the US and Canada. Because I don't think what's going to work is California does it by mile, and Colorado does it by the cost of the vehicle when you originally purchase it, and Texas does it by every time you replace your batteries. And you're going to have something that's consistent that works just like consistently. We have a fuel tax across every state. It's not the same in every state, but there is a fuel tax in every state, and in every state that goes back to working on the infrastructure. Now, before somebody corrects me, I realize that some states have stolen their infrastructure taxes and used it for other things. Okay, that's a different argument. Okay, what I'm talking about is that supposedly in every state, at least some percentage of your fuel tax, when you fill up your car, your truck, whatever you're fueling up, some percentage of that's going back to infrastructure. If we knock down even a small percentage of that, we have to rethink the way we do taxes. And right now, I don't see how we get along well enough to make that change.
Well, and I think that's exactly the.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think the state of Connecticut is getting ready to be the example, or to see how this goes, because I think, what is it, this year, starting the 1st of January, they implemented a 17.5 cent mile tax for the commercial truck industry. So that's going to be, I think that's going to be a test tube, maybe, to see how this is really going to be, accepted. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see if the answer to some people is going to be really increase that fuel tax. Some states are going to do that so that it will make you not want to, in the same way they got rid of cigarettes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Made it too expensive to smoke for most people. All right. And they can make it too expensive to drive a fossil fuel vehicle for most people. That's an approach. But again, I don't think that works if just Connecticut does it, or if just New York does it, or if New York, Connecticut, Colorado, and Florida do it, but Missouri and Illinois don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Because then what do? Well, you start, what do we end up with? Some kind of underground system where we're, hey guys, I got in a load of diesel from Missouri. Okay. I'm gonna sell it for half the cost that you can get it here in Texas because we got that stupid extra tax here. I mean, that kind of stuff, it could happen. So we got a lot to talk about as far as EV, and we will over time, but we got to wrap up this segment. We're out of time now, and we got somebody else we want to introduce you to here in just a minute. You're listening to TNCRadio.live. Stay right there.
Ready for a music break? Did you know that you can use the TNCRadio.live app to hear the best in traditional country? Traditional country, the good stuff from the 50s and 60s and on. Traditional country is more than a time period. It's a style and approach to music that we cherish. We have an incredible collection of songs that define country music, and also sprinkle in some Western music, cowboy music, bluegrass, Americana, and country gospel. Our TRUSA president and country Western music icon, Rex Allen Jr., also hosts an hour of music and memories. At TRUSA, we have a heart for the road and the heritage of country music. Wherever you roam, we hope you'll take us with you. Enjoy the ride on Truckers Radio USA. To listen to TRUSA Radio on the TNCRadio.live app, just click on the music button and then TRUSA.
TNCRadio.live, your commercial driver navigation station.
I'm Shelley Johnson with Kathy Tuccaro. You can hear us Tuesdays on TNCRadio.live at 8 p.m. Eastern on Women Road Warriors. And don't miss Steve Summers' Overnight Drive right here on TNCRadio.live, weeknights midnight to 5 a.m. Eastern. Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Welcome back to Mind Your Trucking Business on TNCRadio.live.
Welcome back in TNCRadio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. I'm Tom Kelly along with Jamie Urban and James Rogers. And we have a special guest with us, Charlie Claiborne, whose new show, Highway Fever, is coming up right after this show. Really excited to have you with us, Charlie. Welcome to TNC Radio.
Man, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to this. I've been listening to a lot of the broadcasts today, and there's some great talented people on here, a lot of information. I am truly excited to be part of this team.
Well, we're awfully glad to have you with us. Charlie, we've got James here. James is a owner of a small fleet based out of the Midwest. He's a driver. He's out there driving and managing other drivers and doing that kind of stuff. We've got Jamie. He's up in Canada. He's the host of the Heavy Duty Parts Report. And you can also catch Jamie on his website, heavydutypartsreport.com. Correct, Jamie?
That's correct.
And you can catch James on how do people find you, James?
On YouTube, on the Road Rage Podcast.
On Road Rage Podcast. And now the three of us have come together. We've been doing this show for a few months called Mind Your Trucking Business. And from now on Thursday nights, right after Mind Your Trucking Business, it's going to be Charlie's show, Highway Fever. Charlie, tell us a little bit about what you're going to be accomplishing in your show.
A lot of education, as I'm sure that some of these guys educate people on trucking business and trucking mechanical issues and parts and a lot of the things that the other shows cover. I'm more of an agenda-driven guy, like speed limiters, truck parking, broker transparency, the list goes on and on. Our show is geared more to how to deal with our regulators, how to properly deal with our elected representatives, and show people that there's a right way and a wrong way to do things, and try to build some unity, some camaraderie. You're never going to bring back the old school days of trucking. They're gone. But what we can do is we can all at least learn to get along, get together, and work together on issues that we can agree on. Some people agree on truck parking. Some people don't agree with speed limiters. So you got to find that common ground and you work on the issues that you can work on together.
That's fantastic. And I know, Charlie, you've recently taken on a role. We're going to talk about it more on your show in just a little bit here, but recently taken on a role with the North American Driver Resource Association.
Great organization. I was a little skeptical about getting involved, but man, I tell you what, it turned out to be a great bunch of people, intelligent, smart, thoughtful, and compassionate, most of all, for their fellow drivers. They've inspired me to come in and work with them. And it so far, I have never met a greater bunch of advocates for the industry.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, Charlie, we're really looking forward to your show, and we look forward to hearing you here starting in just a few more minutes. One more time, I want to make sure people remember to tune in with James Rogers on the Road Rage Podcast. You can find that on YouTube. And also, Jamie Urban little mind block there for a second. Jamie Urban on the Heavy Duty Parts Report. Jamie, what you've got going on this week on the Heavy Duty Parts Report?
We just dropped episode 240, and we were talking to the CEO of Senzit. They've developed some technology that allows you to bolt on their device to your commercial vehicle, and it will provide you with a whole bunch of predictive maintenance data. It'll tell you exactly what's going on with your vehicle, help you to reduce maintenance intervals if you're over maintaining things like changing oil filters too soon, changing oil too soon, that kind of thing. But it'll also help you to predict when something will fail ahead of time so that you can reduce downtime events. It was a great interview, and I think their technology is amazing.
Fantastic. And James, how about for you? What you got going on this week?
I'm in the process of preparing a show, actually talking about the FLSA predicament that's going on here in the future. What's the potential of it? I got the great opportunity to listen to a great interview about a week or two ago, and I really started digging into it. And it's something that we need to discuss in this industry, because It's a little different than AB5. It's got a little more bite to it.
Yeah, it does. All 183 pages of it. And we,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about that on this program, on Charlie's program, and others too, I'm sure, over the course of the next few weeks and months. Guys, really appreciate you. Thank you very much. Very fun show, good show today. And we look forward to being back with you again next Thursday right here on TNCRadio.live. This is Mind Your Trucking Business. Stay tuned next for Charlie Claiborne and Highway Fever.
Do you have the TNCRadio.live app? It's free and easy to download. Just go to app.tncradio.live, Google Play, or the App Store. Get access to live streaming radio developed by drivers for drivers. Download the TNCRadio.live app today.
Don't forget, you can hear all of our TNC Radio primetime shows again on our podcasts. Just go to tncradio.live/podcasts or search for TNCRadio.live wherever you listen to podcasts.